Hello and welcome back to the channel. Yet again I'm doing something that I strongly suspect that the overwhelming majority of you are perfectly well acquainted with this sort of material, but since questions have been asked, here I am. That is the direct relationship between the archives, what you can find in the archives, and of course ship modeling. I will be using examples from material that I happen to have here at home, or rather I should say Olya happens to have, since this is mostly her stuff, barring the books in the corner, which of course, whenever you see books on either this one or the sister channel, they are mine. I'm the bookworm here, or book rat, depending on what you choose to call me. I will take it as a compliment in either way. The majority of ship modelers, I suppose, begin with one form of a kit or another. I would happen to be one of the few exceptions to this rule. And by all means, the kits have much of the research already done for you. Some of the material is cut if you do not have fully equipped shop. The early stages, at least some of the bulkheads, etc., are already cut for you. So that can be quite useful and stimulate, to say, the interest and the early stages of a ship modeling career. However, better heads than mine and infinitely better modelers than me have already pointed out something that we all know, that much of what the kits produce is of questionable quality as far as the research goes. And it is historically frequently inaccurate. And so arises the question, after a kit or two, can you improve upon it? Well, clearly. Ole, for one, has made a career of improving kits. And most of you, since most of you are coming onto this channel from hers, obviously are more than well acquainted with that work. Here is an example. It is a model of the Pegasus, which is part of the Swan class of sloops. When I speak of class, this actually is inappropriate term. It is anachronistic. At the time, the term that they would have used for this would have been built on the lines of, etc., etc. The truth of the matter, of course, is that although this is a nice little kit that evidently is coming together quite easily and pleasantly, and no doubt will end up being a very pretty model, assuming I live long enough to see it completed, with all the other commissioned material that comes in the way. But there always is something that you can improve upon. And of course, the first line of the research for that would be books. In this case, we are all deeply indebted to the great ship modeler, David Antscherl, probably one of the foremost modelers that I can think of, who of course is known for scratch building, not kit building. But in this case, his books on the Swan class, well known, published by Sea-Watch. I hardly need to go into recommending them. Everybody has heard of them, everybody has seen them, and they truly are outstanding research and step-by-step instruction for switching from a kit to a real build of a vessel. But that is really your first stop for additional material. Published books, something that is fairly easily available either through the numerous online booksellers or through a local friendly library, some such source. These are the easy to obtain sources of information. But what if you want to go deeper? And Mr. Antscherl himself recommends actually the original drawings. There are a number of sources that contain original drawings around the world. I have not worked with all the archives, so I cannot and will not pretend to know how easy it is to work with most. Obviously, there is the American archives in Washington, D.C., which contain significant number of ship's drawings, but they are mostly late for rather obvious reasons. The majority of these drawings are from the 19th century and really the middle of the 19th century onwards, although there are some from as early as the War of 1812. The overwhelming collection of drawings of earlier American ships, 18th century and early 19th century, War of 1812 period. Those you can find in the British archives. Because the majority of American ships built in this period ended up being captured by the British. And God bless them, but they did record them in detail, even when they considered them lousy sailors, as was the case with the Chesapeake, with the Essex, but we do have British drawings for both. Other archives. Well, the Danish archives are actually very rich. There is a variety of ships. The Danish Admiralty was collecting drawings, whether it was through spies, whether it was through other means, but they have significant collection, including British and other ships in their archives. They themselves had a very interesting shipbuilding tradition. There used to be a 2-volume set of drawings, mostly dating from around the Great Northern War period and later of Danish vessels. Some of them a little bit strange, but all of them very, very interesting. And unfortunately, I do not see ship modelers really utilizing these into what would be unique and beautiful models. Then there are, of course, the French archives. After all, France had the second most impressive navy, pretty much from the reign of Louis XIV, after the Dutch slowly started moving to second position as far as naval power was considered. France became the second power in the world. Then there are, of course, the Spanish archives, which also contain, and Spanish shipbuilding tradition was extremely interesting. We know very little practical details from the 17th century. We do have proportions, we do have some lists of ships, we do have some treatises and recommendations, especially from the early 17th century. But as far as wrecks and actual construction, we do not have that much, because most of Spanish maritime cultural heritage, especially the ones that ended up in the Caribbean, have become victims to treasure hunters and have, for all practical purposes, been destroyed. The Nuestra Señora de Atocha is among these. We do know a significant part of the hull was surviving prior to the treasure hunting expeditions. And of course, there are the Venetian archives, very rich, again, mostly from the later 17th century onwards throughout the 18th century, but they are held at the Arsenal, and they are impressive because Venice had an incredible maritime culture in the naval force in this period. Although by the 18th century, of course, Venice was definitely a secondary maritime power. Having listed only a few, there is, of course, Sweden. There are the Chapman drawings in the Swedish archives. Let's talk a little bit more about the British, which are the easiest to access, or perhaps I should take this back and should paraphrase it to where it states that it is the most, the best known in the English-speaking world, and not only. Also because at one stage or another, from the late 17th century throughout the 18th and the beginning of the 19th century, Great Britain was at war with pretty much everybody around the world. Because they tended to have the nasty habit of winning, significant numbers of foreign ships ended up being captured and documented by the British. Thus, the British archives can yield, as the Danish, information of vessels that had nothing to do with the British Royal Navy. And a search through the website is bound to provide you with excellent, outstanding information. Of course, the next question to discuss is, what are this sort of drawings really containing? Well, what can you hope to find? There are some redrawings of earlier 17th century ships. There are a few sets surviving from the 17th century, but as far as identified vessels, we really need to move into the 18th century. And you can find drawings from fairly early in the century all the way until the end of the Age of Sail. I assume, I'm stopping there because I assume that most of the viewers of this channel are interested only in the Age of Sail. Personally, though, I recognize the interest, the technological achievement of the mixed period of the middle of the 19th century until the armored vessels emerge and sail disappears from warships, be substituted for steam. Absolutely, technologically, this is a phenomenal period. They are kind of interesting, cute, but definitely hold no interest to me. Whoever wants to play with them, by all means, my admiration. I'll be delighted to see the models. I'm not likely to spend any of my time researching that period. So, continuing with this specific example, because this is what I happen to have here at the house rather than at the office. In the office I do have some 17th century drawings also, perhaps another video in the future. What kind of information are you likely to find? Well, as a matter of fact, it varies dramatically from ship to ship. And sometimes it is no more than the lines planning. In fact, the overwhelming majority of drawings are going to contain only the lines plan. This particular vessel is the Fly, and this is unique set of drawings. What is unique about it? It has details of the decoration. There is another drawing that gives you even more detail on the decoration, but by and large, this is not what you're going to find in the archives. Usually, the painted friezes, the carvings in the stern, the carvings in the bow, usually are not shown on the drawings. In the overwhelming majority of cases, this is all that you're going to have. A profile of the vessel, that is to say the shear plan, a half-breadth plan down under it, and the body of the vessel, as you see here under my right hand. Well, you sort of see it. But since most of you have enough experience with this, I hardly need telling what this is. What can you expect from the shear plan? It is going to show you the arrangement of the platforms in the hold. It is going to show you where the hatches are. It will show you arrangement of the decks, quarter decks, the position of pumps, capstans, the riding bits often enough, and other bits. It is not going to show you any further detail from this, partially because this was something that every shipwright knew. It was the lines that were important, because based on them, the lofting of and creation of the molds from which the timbers would be shaped was possible. But that was something that every shipyard, the rest of the construction, every shipyard knew. They were pretty standardized. You didn't have to have any particular information. The Fly is an exception to this rule. In the case of the Fly, we have the lines with all the modifications and the internal structure. This really is a pure shear of the same vessel that does not have any of the internal arrangements. Then we have, in this case, also a drawing that is showing you, and this is unique, this is showing you the orlop, the platforms, and even the arrangement of cabins and storage areas down in the boat. There are a few ships that have this type of drawing in it, but they are fairly few. Usually it is only the shear plan and not nearly as detailed. This really is a better representation of what most of these vessels would look like on the shear plan. In other words, as you can see, there is no figurehead, there are no details along the side of the vessel. This is the very basic drawing which would be distributed to the shipyards. In the case of the Swan, of course, a number of vessels were built on the same lines. That's why numerous copies of this drawing were made, and they were sent out to the different shipyards. In the case of the Swan, we even have a framing plan. Now that is my sheer joy and delight. And the reason I'm showing you this plan is not only because of the arrangement of the fairly light framing, as you would expect from a sloop of war. In this case, a three-masted vessel cruising ship that would have been commanded by a master and commander, not by a full post captain. It not only is showing you the distribution of the frames and how they were positioned, but also in the instructions on the sheet itself, it is telling you, this paragraph here is actually telling you exactly how to assemble the frames. That at every butt, that is say wherever the anchor stock is holding the pieces of the frames, 2 boats should be used to secure it. And other detailed information that you can sometimes find on these drawings is here under my left hand, properly hiding it from my viewers. Top secret, obviously. It is telling you how many ships were built to these lines, which ships were ordered in which period, what date. Then it was added to which shipyard, who were the private contractors. Down here, under my fingers, here, you can see which of the vessels was sent to which private yard to be built on contract. Some were built from 1775 onwards. The latest of the group at the very bottom is dated 1778. So the same drawing was being copied and sent to the yards as for a duration of about 3 years in which the vessels were constructed. As I said, this is an ideal situation. It is very rare that you're going to have all this detail, or in this case, you even have the upper deck of the vessel, which of course is not the main deck of the ship, but that's a different story. But here it is, with distribution of hatches, with the scale. This is all great. The information that you can extract from such places is fantastic. No one has done more popular and more detailed work along these lines from archival drawings than the great David Antscherl himself. But as I said, this is one of the rare cases when you can really find all this information. Usually you have much less to work with. Then you should go to other sources of information. You can extract a lot from these drawings. You can extract the sided and molded dimensions of the frames, at least the sided ones. But then there are enough treatises, and many of them are now available online with PDF, where they will give you the actual proportions. From the mid-18th century all the way until, of course, David Steele's more popular book of the early 19th century. This information is available. It is out there. It is easily accessible. And there is no reason under God's good heaven why modelers should keep on repeating the same old models. For God's sake, I just found out that yet another book is about to be published on Nelson's victory and how she looked at Trafalgar. If I had $1 for every publication on the subject of how victory looked at Trafalgar, I would be a multimillionaire. And right now, I would be in the Caribbean, kicking up my heels on a beautiful Edwardian yacht and having my drinks right about this time. One type of information that you are extremely unlikely to find in the archives, as far as drawings are concerned, these are the spars and rigging plans. There are a few, mostly of later vessels, usually if there is something unique, something strange about the rig, but traditionally you do not have plans for the rig. In this case, specifically for the Swan class, David Antscherl has developed interpretation of what the rigging and the spars would have looked like. So you can buy them from Sea-Watch and, of course, from David Antscherl's business partner and business book. But this is the sort of drawings that you're not going to find in the archives. This can be reconstructed, as David did it, from different sources of information. Proportions of rigs and rigging exist in the archives, but not in the same place where the ship's drawings are. And of course, the most easily accessible is David Steele's, which this part, the rigging part of his books, has recently been republished at a very reasonable price, because his drawings, ships and ship construction, those run between $600 and $1,200. I was planning to buy a set of those drawings years ago, but then I stumbled, got married, and anyway. Under the video there will be a list of sources, first and foremost for the books, of course. The Antscherl's page where you can buy the drawings already prepared. This perhaps is the right moment to mention that these archival drawings are fantastic, but they are 200, 300, 400 years old. So the paper has deformed over the ages. So taking the drawing directly is not going to produce a fair hull. You have to redraw them. It's not that complicated. It's a fairly easy job to do. It's something that I was taught to do as a graduate student at Texas A&M. There are plentiful instructions available in different books, but you have to fair the lines before you can produce molds from which to build the vessel. That's probably what stops many people from switching from kits to scratch building, and yet it is probably, to me at least, the most interesting part of the process, following the traditional old style master shipwrights. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a most wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you next time.